Hey, what's up, guys? It's your boy Ruff Diesel here, and you're here with the Iron Eating Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, top four, 7 times after Mr. Olympia, one of the best posers of all time, industry leader, still in the industry today, Labrada. How are you doing today?
It's great to be here, Terrence. It's a real pleasure. Doing great.
That's good. That's good. I had you on here today, basically because I was on Instagram and I saw a post from you talking about how guys from your era created a lot of the poses that a lot of us use today, and I never really thought about that concept. So I figured I'd have you on, and we can kind of like discuss a bit about, you know, some of your inspirations and kind of how you
Sure.
took what they learned and changed it throughout the years. Who were some of your inspirations? When you first got started.
So some of my early influences on posing were Ed Corney and Mohammed McAway. I would also say that Frank Zane and even Samir Bannout influenced my posing early on also. And I did develop my own style, but I found it helpful to watch videos of some of these superstars at the time and to learn to do the movements and the poses and such that they did. I remember seeing Ed Corney live in person when I was 17 years old in Florida. He was guest posing, and it was just amazing because to me it looked like a statue in motion. Where a lot of the bodybuilders back then were very good at hitting what I call the static poses. Okay, they were not as good in the transitions because, and I call those, as you already know, Terrence, because you and I have talked about this, I call those the dynamic poses. The transitions are poses also, and those are the moving poses, the dynamic poses that get you from static pose to static pose. So a static pose is like a front double bicep or a front lat spread, or a side chest, but the transition is just as important. And so Ed Corney was the first that I saw in person, and it was just jaw dropping. The ability, the grace to flow from one pose to another, was very, very impressive. And so he was one of my early influences, and I realized that I didn't have to just go up there and hit, 12 or 16 static poses and just kind of fumble from one pose to the other. That the mesmerizing presentation came from doing the transitions. Later on, I had the opportunity to watch some of the video of Mohammed McAway, in the I believe it was the '82 Mr. Olympia, and I was really taken back by how graceful he was, how impressive his hand gestures were, and how powerful he looked for a guy that might have only been 5'3" tall,
Yeah.
okay, and maybe 170 pounds. And this guy was placing second in the Mr. Olympia, which was just amazing. And I think he had a charismatic presence, something
Very
that
much
a
so.
lot of the guys miss these days, because they're so focused on the actual posing that they forget, what they're showing on their face,
Yeah.
and it's a complete package. But those were two of my early influences.
So you mentioned something very interesting, like, and I've noticed it as well. Like when we're talking about like actual posing routines, things started to really explode in the '80s. Like I look at a lot of the '70 guys, their transitions weren't as nice as guys in the '80s, and I don't know if that's I'm wondering why. I don't know if it's because maybe they didn't get to choose their music, so maybe it was a little different that way, or maybe you said that you were able to watch a lot of videos, so you know that helped me quite a bit watching videos of guys like you, Mohammed, and being able to see what was going on, like in between the actual photographs. What you would normally see from guys from the '70s didn't have a lot of videos, so they only saw photos unless they were in person. So I definitely feel that like being able to watch videos helped transform, you know, the level of posing, you know, from the 70s and 80s. What do you think about that? You have any opinion on kind of what was the defining difference between the 70s, 80s, and how it happened?
So in the 70s, the bodybuilders started to actually pay attention to the transitions. I think that Ed Corney was the biggest pioneer of that era, you know, a trendsetter, and I think that because of what he was doing, he influenced a lot of the bodybuilders in that era, you know, to work on doing, better transitions, you know, and focusing on their dynamic poses, as I call them. And then going into the early 80s, that was picked up by the likes of Mohammed Makaway. And you had a number of guys by that time that were very fluent posers, Samir Bannout, Bob Paris, myself. There were a number, and I'm sure I'm overlooking some of them. But by the mid '80s, everybody was doing their best to move gracefully from pose to pose.
Okay, okay. I think another thing I love about Muhammad Makawi is from the front. I mean, don't get me wrong, he looked great, but from the front, he was a not. I don't want to say blocky, but I think what I will say is he knew that his best position was from the side. Like a lot of those side poses where his waist was really, really small, really, really, I think elevated him. You know, when it came to posing, he was like a master of hiding his weaknesses. You know.
Well, and on that note, I would agree. I don't know if I would call him blocky so much as that he didn't have a huge shoulder to waist
Yeah.
differential, like somebody like Robbie Robinson, for instance. And he had narrow clavicles, but he did his best. He had a very, very hard defined midsection, and he did a really good job, of doing the twist in the hips,
Hmm.
to make the waist look smaller than it was. But that brings us to a really important point there, Terrence, which is to say that one of your goals as a poser is to hide your flaws as best as you can. Now, listen, the obvious thing is you're not going to be able to hide, if you have a big blocky waist, you're not going to be able to hide that in every pose, right?
Yeah.
There's just some things that you have to do straight on, like a lat spread, for instance, okay? But that being said, when you're doing the freestyle posing, then you should choose poses accordingly that accentuate your strong points and try to diminish the weaker points of the physique.
Okay. Okay. No, I definitely agree about that. Uh, Moving on into the 80s, I think a lot of people consider you probably the best. I mean, like I consider you the best poser of all time.
Well, thank
But
you.
um, what I would say, like, if you had to kind of go through like some of the guys, some of your peers of that era, what uh, what made each person stand out, and what made you stand out in particular too?
I liked the posing of Bob Paris. I thought he was very artistic, and oftentimes overlooked. I actually liked Lee Haney's posing, and even if it comes as a surprise, it wasn't complicated posing, but he was very graceful, moving in between poses, and especially for a guy that big. So those are two to come to mind. I believe Samir Bannout was a good poser. Frank Zane was a very good poser. So some of the guys from that era, and again, I know that I'm overlooking some, so
Hmm.
forgive me if I've overlooked you guys. But those are just some of the ones that come to mind, yeah, at the moment. Now, I want to tell you one thing though, that um, as much as I believe that posing was refined through the 70s into the 80s, I do believe that it reached a pinnacle in the late 80s and early 90s before the Dorian Yates era.
Hmm.
and then bodybuilding seemed to go in the direction of what I call mass building, and not so much bodybuilding, and where for a long time the muscle size was rewarded to the exclusion of other components of a great physique, symmetry, proportion, muscularity, the flow of the muscles, the proportions, between the limbs and the torso and things like that. A lot of that stuff started getting tossed to the side, and I think that we're still in danger of some of that in the men's open bodybuilding today. And I think that again, it comes down to the judging criteria. I think that the bodybuilders are going to do whatever they're rewarded for,
For
and for the
sure.
longest time, they have not been rewarded for having excellent display. They're rewarded for doing the mandatory poses, which come in the prejudging and the like, and it's pretty much set from that point on, and the poser routine is an afterthought that they do for the audience. So if there's no incentive for them to pose well, then you're going to see a lot of what you've been seeing in the last few years, which basically, they look like tanks basically clunking between, static pose and static pose with very little on the transition.
I definitely agree with that. I think, I think like the worst of it hit its peak maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I remember Arnold came out and said some things, and it was a real big um, like a cancel culture for bubble guts.
Yes.
Um, right around the time they came out with Classic. Um,
Yes.
I would say I do believe things are getting better. I don't like you said.
I do
There's
too.
it's still in danger, but
Yeah.
obviously
I do
guys
too.
like
I think things are getting better. And just so you know, on that topic of bubble gut, for a long time, people would point and they would say, okay, well, that's all of the insulin and GH that these guys are using. It listen, okay, it's just plain laziness.
I think
Okay,
I
in other
agree.
words, they just don't control their stomach. Okay, I'm big, I can just let it all hang out. I'm powerful, I can just let it all hang out. And that's BS. Okay, because the waistline is the connector between the upper body and the legs, and it is a focal point, and it needs to remain a focal point, and it needs to remain being judged as a focal point and rewarded as it deserves, as a focal point of the physique. So, to all of those of you that are watching, control your gut. Don't let your belly hang out. Work at it. If you work at it, you'll be able to do it. Trust me.
I agree. I remember when that came out, he fixed it, which is pretty cool. Rolly Winkler was like the main guy a lot of people were talking about, and as soon as Arnold came out and said that the following year he was able to hit a vacuum.
How
I
about
t-
that? So,
mm-hmm,
to Rolly's credit, great guy, by the way. Very, very nice human being, great champion.
for sure.
Um, to his credit, he took that advice and he ran with it, and I promise you, he practiced it.
I
And it just
guarantee
goes
it.
to show you that big guys can do stomach vacuums as well if they're willing to put in the work.
I totally agree. I think a lot of times, people are focused on, growing their biceps, the quads, the shoulders, whatever. Like you said, they neglect like a good portion of their bodies. Um, most people don't even train their abs in the off season.
Well, I've seen that. I have seen that myself, and it's just an afterthought, really. It's just like, hey, let's just throw some abs at the end of the workout. Well, gosh, what if you were to prioritize your abs? What if you
Hmm.
did that first in your workout, and you put as much intensity and energy into that as you did the other body parts like your arms and your legs and your back?
And that's another big thing. People, and they do this with calves too. They say, "Oh, I train calves," and I'm like, "Well, it's at the end of your workout. You're not actually focused on it. You're just trying to rush through it. You're bouncing.
Right.
You're not putting focused intention into that body part, and you're gonna get what you put in, basically.
That's right.
You know.
That's right.
Um,
By the way, Terrence, your posing is really exceptional,
you
and I really enjoy watching you as well. And it's obvious that you work at it. You're a creative person, and you work at it also.
going to that. I've said this quite a bit too, and I noticed you've said the same thing where my posing didn't kind of reach the level it is today until I stopped trying to copy people that I liked. You know, and I remember reading this thing, and it says basically, I mean, everyone. It's just this old saying. Basically, people say, you know, you can't be someone else. Basically, there's only there's that person they're gonna be the best. You know, let's say for instance, a guy wants to be like Terrence. I tell him, you don't want to be like me. There's only one me. Be the best version of you can be.
That's
You
right.
know.
I'm a guitar player. I'm a musician also, and so it's very common for musicians when they're learning to play to copy the riffs of other musicians. You know, they will literally note for note play the compositions of other musicians, and but what happens at a certain point is if you're going to develop and you're going to create your own style, you have to turn that off. You cannot
Hmm.
mechanically go through and copy the compositions of other artists. You have to develop your own style. The other artist's influence will still be there,
Hmm.
okay? But you have to develop your own style and develop your own voice. And physiques are very much, um, they're individual. No two physiques are identical. I'm telling you guys something you already know. And so I think that even though two people may do the same pose, they could look dramatically different, right? You would agree with that.
I would
So
agree.
you just have to be the best you can be. Adjust the angles on the pose to again bring out the personality in your physique.
That's perfect. That's a perfect answer to that. Um, I know when I first got started, that was very much the case for me. I always say like the top three or four influences, you, Kai, Muhammad Makawi, and Bob Paris are like my top influences. And if you go back and look at some of my earlier routines, you can see very very heavy influences of that. And
Sure.
I always say it was interesting, but it wasn't polished, and it's
Right.
because I could never do it as well as you or Kai or all these other guys. So
Right. Right.
um, it took me maybe 2018. It took me about 5 years to kind of find my own, like learn from you guys, and then create my own style and kind of
Sure.
and build something that way.
Yeah. By the way,
Um,
Kai Green is a great poser, and even though he's a big, big guy,
yeah.
he moves well and he has his own unique style.
Hmm.
Love it or hate it, but he's got his own unique style, and it's very entertaining to watch.
And I think that's the way it should be. Like I don't think everyone should pose the same. Like Logan is a great pose, Logan Franklin, but the way me and him pose are very very much different. And
Right.
I think it brings some originality, some fun into it when you have different types of posers
That's
doing
right.
different things.
That's right.
Um, it's definitely the case. There's this guy out in Australia too, Pete Hardwick, very amazing poser. I'll send you a video of him later.
I'd love to see it.
He does a lot of old school posing. He's very much into late '70s style, like Ed Corney type posing, and
Sure.
he's also even added like a magic element in some of his routines, where he'll pull out a flower, like he wears these cuffs, and he'll pop a flower will just pop out, and he'll just throw it. It's
Yes,
interesting.
that's interesting stuff. So it's interesting when posers have some kind of a theme that's associated with them, and with the one that just popped to mind was back in the late '80s when Vince Taylor did the Terminator routine, to
Yeah.
the Terminator music, and had these robotic sequences, and they were very eye-catching and crowd-pleasing.
How do you feel about some of the guys where they're like there's a debate now where some people they do more like dancing rather than posing and some people like it, some people don't. How do you feel about stuff
You
like
know,
that?
Well, I think that the bottom line is it's personal expression. Now I know that these guys and gals are not getting up there doing 10 seconds of dancing and then hitting a pose. I mean, they're probably, spending 3 to 4 seconds, 2, 3, 4 seconds, in a transition and then hitting a static pose and then
Hmm.
flowing to another one. That's all personal expression. So if they want to have, hand movements and leg movements that are reminiscent of dance, interpretive dance, then I'm all for it.
I think it's great. And when people ask me, like people who aren't into bodybuilding, what is posing, I typically tell them it's like interpretive dancing in a sense. I think that's honestly the best way to describe it.
It's just a personal expression of the human body, and it's motion, it's power, and when you combine those elements like that into something that is choreographed to music, it can be very moving.
I had another question. I think you elevated posing quite a bit. Can you
Thank you.
kind of go through the process of some of the routines you've made? Kind of like, say you're getting ready for a show and you're like, I want to. Where the so I'm at a point now where with my posing, I see what has been done and I'm like, okay, how can I elevate this? How can I change this? How can I make this a little better or
Sure,
different? Did you kind of
sure.
go through the same process?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I did once I had reached the professional level, and I was refining my posing routines. One of the things that I would strive to do would be to work to music. So some bodybuilders, what they'll do is they'll have a posing routine, and then they'll try to just kind of jam it into a piece of music. I would start with the music first.
Hmm.
And I knew that I had a set number of poses. In fact, I would literally write them down on a piece of paper, all the different poses that I wanted to include in the routine. Okay. And then what I would do is I would literally start putting them together like a Lego set.
Yep.
Like this would look good in this part of the music. This would look really good in this part of the music. But now to go from these four poses over to these three poses because the music's changing, I have to do something really artistic and fluid to get into these three. You
I
see,
love,
and
yeah.
so that's what I would do, and I would work with the music, and that's how I came to form, like that bullfighter routine that I had, with some traditional Spanish music. So I would just basically go with the flow of the music.
Did you do that routine kind of like as a homage to like your Cuban
It
ancestry
was
or
it was homage to my a tribute to my ancestry, which is from the north of Spain. Of course, I was born in Cuba, but my ancestors emigrated from the north of Spain to Cuba, and so that one was particularly close to my heart. I worked with a very good Spanish choreographer, with a ballet troupe in Madrid for that passage where you have the arm coming across,
yeah.
but that bullfighting passage, and so he gave me the idea for that. But the routine itself, the poses, all of that were mine individually.
Okay.
So it was just a way of getting Spanish influence, artistic influence into the routine.
I think that's great, and I don't know if too many people have done things like that where they do tributes and they bring in people like that to kind of have a message in a sense, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
and when it's done right, again, it takes time. That was probably the most time-consuming, most difficult routine that I ever did. But when it's done right and it's done, at an emotional level, because when I'm doing the routine, I'm performing, and there's certain emotions that come up with that. And I think that that's why that routine was so successful also because, humans they give off a vibration, okay? And the audience picks that up. And that's what's missing with a lot of the routines nowadays is passion. When I mean they have anger down. The most muscular, really the face, like
Yeah.
they have that one down, but they're overlooking things that you can find in music, soft passages before it starts crescendoing again. And there's this emotional roller coaster. And once you have the routine down, if you're feeling these things, they come through the expressions on your hands, your face, and that type of thing. And dancers know this. People who are in ballet, professional dancers know this. They use this all the time. Just because there's just an energy that they exude.
I definitely agree. There's this one guy I've seen. I look at him posing, and I'm like, well, technically the poses you're hitting, they look fine. Everything's like technically okay, but I don't. You're not like you don't
Right.
feel it. Yeah.
Right. It's mechanical. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that to get away from that, okay, in other words, okay, great, Lee, I can do these poses, I can copy it, but I'm still looking mechanical. Learn it to the point where you don't have to think about it, okay, about the
Mm-hmm.
routine. And then at that point, listen to the music. What are you feeling? Feel it, and then show that.
I think that's right. A lot of times people ask me what I'm thinking when I'm doing a routine. I'm like, I'm not really thinking at all. I'm just doing it. Yeah,
Yeah,
feeling
and
it. Yeah.
I will tell you something, because again, so many of us, we all start, you know, not knowing how to do anything. We don't know how to do a pose, a transition, anything, and then we practice it. We keep getting better and that type of thing. We realize we're going to make mistakes, But I will tell you that even through my latter years in competition, I would always reach a point where my adrenaline rush, was such right before I go on stage that, I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm blanking out. Oh my God, I'm blanking out. I've forgot my routine. But that's the left side of my brain talking.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the logical side, right?
Yeah.
And I used to just say to myself as I was walking out, I would just say, power on. And that was my trigger. And it was like the right side of my brain, the creative side, would just take over. I mean, literally, it was like I was adrenalized, but my body was moving by itself, and I was a casual observer inside my head. It was just a really an amazing experience.
One thing I'll notice too is like while I'm going through a routine, I'm totally fine. Everything's good, and then when I'm done, I start to feel all the exhaustion. It's like, oh, that was actually pretty tough to go through.
You don't realize it until you don't
Yeah.
realize it until you get out. Yeah,
Oh
until
my
you get off the stage, and then you're about to face plant.
Um, I thought too, which this was pretty interesting. What I've been noticing, I think in life, um, each generation builds off the last, and I've been seeing a lot of newer athletes, a lot of newer posers. They're like 18, 19, and they're already good. I'm like, holy crap,
Yes, I
you
love
know?
that. I love that. It's they're taking it seriously. They're taking posing as an art, where they're displaying the human form, their bodies, and it's motion and it's powerful, and so it combines muscle with motion. And these kids will send me videotapes. They'll literally send me videotapes on Instagram, and it's just like, wow, you can pose like that, and they haven't even fully developed their physiques yet, but it just for love of the motion, they're already doing these things, and some of these guys they're gonna surprise you. They're going to surprise you in the next few years. I think there's really a renaissance going on from the angle of the posing presentation.
I want to actually show you this kid Umar. Probably I think he's like 21 years old. I'm gonna pull him up. The level he's at already. I mean, by the time he's got a good physique already as well. By the time he's 25, 26, 30, he's gonna make us all look pretty bad. I would say. Let me pull up his latest video. Um, Umar, this guy here. He's French. French guy. This is his. Can you see what? See the video, Lee?
Let's see.
Oh, can you?
Yeah, I think they're in the corner there. Let me throw
Oh,
my glasses on here.
oh, let me pause it.
Okay, I see it.
Okay, this is Umar. He's gonna do something really interesting. He's gonna do like a spin, and I just want to see what you think. I wish you could hear the sound. And I'll show you one more after this. Like that spin, like people are getting that technical.
Yeah, that was pretty cool, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And then he's done some other pretty interesting routines as well.
You know, so many of these classic poses that we see nowadays were developed in the 50s and 60s. You know, and they're quite beautiful. And you know I guess where I'm going with this is what is old is new.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, even if you go back even further, you know, to the era of the Greeks and the Romans, and you look at some of the statues and that type of thing, you know, there's a lot to be learned by looking at those.
You know, I love history, and I kind of went back and researched on Eugene Sandow and kind of how he went about forming bodybuilding, and like you said, he looked at statues to build a lot of the poses he did and kind of build the framework for the sport. So I think in essence, even more so than just lifting weights, art is the soul and the heart of the sport, you know?
It is. It's definitely it's an art and a sport combined.
Going towards the future again. I think what's been pretty cool to see is, in my personal opinion, I think classic has, in a way, influenced the open bodybuilders to at least give a little bit more effort with posing. You've got guys like this guy named James Hollingshed. He's not good at posing at all, but he hired a posing coach. Lofthouse is his name, and he actually put effort into it, and I can appreciate that. I don't
Yeah.
expect every athlete to be the best poser in the world, but I do expect them to put effort towards their craft.
Absolutely. Listen, kudos to James. I didn't realize he'd done that. I've met him. Great guy, very nice person, great athlete, great pro. And the fact that he's doing this is one of those things that, you know, when he looks back, you know, many years from now in his career, he'll be very grateful that he took the time to do that and to develop that aspect of his bodybuilding career. You know, because again, you know, a lot of the classic competitors get it, okay?
Yeah.
You know, but a lot of the open guys are still stuck in the frame of mind, well, I'm not being rewarded, and all I'm going to do is just go up there and do my mandatories, and that's how I'm going to be judged anyway. You know, but here's the thing that you got to remember. You know, judges are human beings, okay? And human beings appreciate art. There's just something in your heart, okay, that is moved when you see grace moving in the form of a ballet presentation. You know, when you see movement in the human body, you know, and you see the emotions that are portrayed by the face and the hands and the poses, and then you combine that with music, now it becomes an experience. Okay, and the judges are humans also, and everything being equal, two guys are equally good, but this one presents like Michelangelo. Guess where that's going to be tilted? Okay,
Exactly.
it's going to be tilted in his favor because human nature being what it is, they recognize the beauty. That's number one. Number two, okay, a lot of these open guys that are just stuck on doing static poses and not working on their transitions don't realize the fact, you know, and I've been talking about this from the very beginning of our podcast here, that those transitions are dynamic poses. They are poses also. And it's just that they're moving poses, okay? And so instead of having 12 static poses, now you've got 24 poses, 12 static and 12 moving poses, and it creates something visually for the judge that sets you higher than the next guy.
I would agree. I think even from like a fan standpoint, it kind of elevates the athlete. Even before I kind of reached that top 5 level Olympian, I was doing pretty well in the sport, like from like people knowing who I was, social media wise because of my posing. So even if you're not the biggest guy at the time, you're not at the point where you're winning all these shows. If you're a great poser, people appreciate it.
It's well, I mean, it's a great way to set yourself apart. We might not even be having this conversation had I not put effort into my posing back in the day, because I certainly wasn't the one who won Mr. Olympia.
Mm-hmm.
Although I pushed everybody that I competed with right to the finish line. But I wasn't the biggest guy, but I was a guy that was mesmerizing because of the way that he was put together and the way that he moved his body.
And I think that's a really good point. I think if we look over the course of bodybuilding, people remember they remember two types of people: the Mr. Olympias and the great posers. Ed Courtney was not a Mr. Olympia, but we all remember him. Guys like you, guys like Bob Paris. If a guy isn't a great poser or a Mr. Olympia, typically they're not in that in that talk, and that they're not
Right.
remembered as well.
That's right. That's right. So it's a plus. It is a
It is a
plus.
plus. Well, I think I might be out of questions today, but it was
Well,
really fun chatting with you, and I definitely want to bring you back on because I mean you have a lot more than just posing to offer.
thank you.
I tell a lot of people, especially these days, understanding how to present yourself as like a business person is very important. To make money, you don't just get people don't just hand you 6-figure contracts like in the early '90s, late 2000s anymore. You
Right.
have to
Right.
understand how to work, and I think all throughout your life you've kind of shown people like you're a hard worker. You know.
I have a good work ethic. It was instilled into me by my parents, and I've worked at everything that I've done throughout my life, and by the grace of God, He's blessed me. He's blessed our family, and I'm very very grateful for that. I want to just encourage everybody out there, Terrence, if you'll allow me to do that.
Of
I'd
course.
just like to encourage everybody out there that's watching this. We all start from somewhere, and I still remember the first time that I learned half a dozen basic poses, and an older gentleman showed me in the gym because I had my first teenage competition coming up, and I didn't know how to do a front double bicep, a lat spread, or anything else. And so we all start not really knowing, but I would like to encourage you to just work at it, and work at it from the standpoint of art. Some people paint. Some people create music. Some do. I mean, some creative. Different things creatively, but the posing and physique presentation is an art, and just do it for the joy of it. And again, I'm going to come back to those teenagers that send their videos. They're not being recognized by millions of people on YouTube, or they're not, winning first place on a stage, but they are just doing that posing for the joy of it,
Hmm.
so that they have something that's representative of their passion, and they're showing that through their routines. So I would just encourage you guys to try that and to work at it and to just enjoy the process.
I love it. I love it. I think that's awesome advice. Do you have anybody you want to plug? Anything you want to, anyone you want to shout out?
I want to give you a shout out. I want to thank you for carrying that torch for all of the younger generation, and elevating posing to a different level. And you're certainly a role model for many that are just coming up through the ranks. So just want to give you a big shout out on that. And I'm thankful to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. Well, again, thank you for having me. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for joining the podcast. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. You too, Terrence.
Awesome.